These on. Hi everyone, how are we? Thank you very much for coming. We are here today with obviously the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who is up for election in the next couple of weeks, and Dale Vince, who is the... well, that's a good response, Sadiq, isn't it? There you go. You might have a few voters in here. And we've got Dale Vince, who's the founder of Ecotricity, which is a green renewable energy supplier. And he's also the pioneer of a lot of the charging units that you might see up and down the country for electric vehicles. So should we start by asking you both, why is it that climate interests you? Because Sadiq, climate is a large part of your brief, and it's also your life's work. So Dale, if you start, tell me, what is it about climate that makes you so energised?
I think it's because it's fundamental to everything, literally to life on Earth, and whatever it is we want to do with and in our lives and that kind of stuff. You know, if we haven't got a planet, and it sounds extreme, but if we haven't got a planet that actually can support us, then we've lost something completely fundamental. And I think that it's such a big issue, and it sounds so dramatic to say that overwhelms people or puts them off, or they think it's an exaggeration or something like that. But quite literally, you know, we're cooking the planet at an unprecedented rate, more carbon in the atmosphere than for millions of years. And for me, it's not about me and us here right now, because it's coming a little bit more slowly than that. But it's about future generations. It's about sustainability ultimately, which has driven me as a purpose since I was a kid.
And Sadiq, look, you know, I mean, if we're going to be frank, climate isn't exactly the most popular policy to get behind. So why do you continually put your career on the line to make things better?
Well, I've got a confession to make, which is I've not always been somebody interested in tackling the climate emergency. Tomorrow is the London Marathon, and 10 years ago, I ran the London Marathon, and importantly, I beat Andy Burnham and Ed Balls. But also, a few months after I ran the marathon, I started having problems breathing. And I thought it was because I was unfit. And I went to the doctors and I was diagnosed with adult onset asthma, which I had got from training to run the London Marathon, because you can't see it, but there's nitrogen dioxide, nitrogen oxide, particulate matter that leads to children having stunted lungs forever, and adults getting a whole host of illnesses from asthma, dementia, cancer to heart disease. And here's the thing, the same things that in London causes carbon emissions, climate change, also is responsible for poor air quality. And that began my journey, Ava, from a selfish reason to try and address both issues, the climate emergency and poor air quality as well. And Ava's right, you know, it can be a lonely journey as a politician to campaign on this and to talk about it. And so what we've tried to do is use Dale's expertise and others to try and, in a non-patronising way, educate Londoners about why it is this is an important issue. You know, we've all experienced, Ava, in the last couple of years, temperatures in London north of 40 degrees Celsius. North of 40 degrees Celsius. We experienced 2 summers ago wildfires in our city. So the London Fire Brigade was the busiest it's been since the Blitz in the Second World War. We have, on some days, rained so much in London that basement flats, some of our stations are flooded. So climate change is happening now to us, but also it's linked with air quality. So there's selfish reasons. I want to cure my asthma. But also I think it's really important that politicians, you know, show some leadership rather than always showing followship. And I think, you know, it's important for leaders to be leaders. Can I just say something?
I just wanted to add to that I started off talking about climate change, the climate crisis, how awfully big it is, and actually I just want to say I don't talk about it that much these days because it's such a big issue, and I think it's not front and centre for most people. It's a cost of living crisis, it's air quality, and I think the arguments we need to make are about the economy, for example. Investing in renewable energy is about jobs, it's about a resilient economy, energy independence. These resonate with people better. Electric cars are about air quality. Plant-based living is about our personal human health and that kind of stuff. And I think these are the ways to communicate with people to get them on board. And when we solve these issues, we solve the climate crisis as like icing on the cake, but it's not the front and centre argument to be made.
And what sort of practical ways can you go about entwining the cost of living crisis and, well, looking after the planet?
Energy is a good example, I think. Energy bills are still twice what they were 2 or 3 years ago. and costing the average household about £1,000 more than they need to. We spent this year as a country, we'll spend £100 billion bringing fossil fuels here just to burn them. So that money goes out of our economy and up in smoke. For half that sum of money, we could build the infrastructure to be completely powered by the wind and the sun. We could be energy independent. And that means being independent of global fossil fuel markets, all of these crises that come up from time to time in global fossil fuel markets. And we could nail our energy bills to the floor and keep them there. With the sum of money that's half of our annual expenditure on fossil fuels, we could be forever powered by the wind and the sun. And it's worth pointing out, fossil fuels are a single-use fuel. Wind and sun, it's a forever fuel. Once we've built the tech to harness it, we have it forever. It'd be the most incredible thing we could do for our economy, creating hundreds of thousands of jobs along the way, and taking a big bite out of the cost of living crisis.
Sadiq, would you say that climate change policies are a good way to interact with younger voters?
With all voters, but it's as Dell is suggesting, it's how you call it what it is. So if we talk about an environmental problem, you think it's a tomorrow issue. But if you talk about a health crisis, an issue of social justice, an issue of racial justice, but also bills, it's a today issue. So I'll give you an example. Dell's talked about the last few years, the cost of living crisis. So one of the reasons why the cost of the energy, gas, electricity is shot up is because we import it. And so when Putin invades Ukraine, the price shoots up. That's causing problems to families across our country. Just imagine if 10, 12 years ago, George Osborne and David Cameron hadn't cancelled the projects in TRAE, the feed-in tariffs, the investment in wind and solar. We would all now be paying far less in our bills than we currently do, and we'd be energy secure. And so when you explain that to people, they think, oh yeah, penny drops. I'll give you just examples in London. So we now have a policy in London since I became mayor. Every building built in London must be zero carbon. So new buildings are the best in the world. That means not just zero carbon emissions, but the bills those families are now paying are far cheaper than their neighbours because they've got heat pumps, they've got double, triple glazing, and they're bigger rooms, so they don't use fans in the summer. We're now working towards zero carbon schools. I was in a school in Hackney, which we helped fund. It's got solar panels on the roof. It cost us £20,000 as a grant, not a lot of money. That school now saves every year thousands of pounds in their bills, helping them with the challenges they've got. And so it's that sort of foresight we need our politicians to have. And here's the irony. Sunak and his team are now campaigning on policies that are anti-tackling the climate emergency. They think it's popular. They put out lies like we want to ban meat, or 15-minute cities will mean you can't go to your local shop, or you're going to have 17 bins, or whatever, to try and disinform and misinform voters. And so half our battle, Dale, me and you, is to rebut the lies and to explain this is a now issue for all of us.
Do you find yourself having to rebut the lies often as well?
I do. I chuckled because I don't know if I find myself having to or I choose to, because I spend some time on right-wing radio and TV and stuff like that. I work with the Daily Express, for example, kind of right-wing publication. And the reason for that is to get outside of the echo or the echo chamber and actually talk to people on the other side. And through that, I've learned what the thoughts and fears and concerns are, and that helps me to change how I talk about things, so that it's a proving ground for ideas, as well as an important thing to do, because we can't let the lies go unchallenged. The idea that we can't afford a green transition, that we have to slow it down, that it costs us money. Net, it doesn't cost money. It's actually cheaper for us. The OBR told our Prime Minister a couple of months ago that it will cost twice as much not to move to green energy as it will to do so. But he ignores that and says we can't afford the green transition, but it's populism, and it's attempt to drag green issues into a new culture war for the Conservatives. They're clearly very desperate about the chances at the next election, but it's important that we counter that. There are all kinds of statistics out there that contradict everything they're saying.
You're often actually on the lips of Conservative MPs. I think they're quite frightened of you. So are you looking forward to a potential Labour government? Do you think you'll have will it be easier to get a few of your climate policies through?
Oh, I think a Labour government would change everything. I think it'll be the greenest government that we've ever had in our country, and it could well be the greenest that the world has ever seen. I think Labour gets the green economy. They see the economic opportunity. And this is the wonderful thing for me. I've been in sustainability for a very long time and trying to promote all of the technologies and the answers that we have actually now, but we needed back then. And something big has happened. The world of the environment and the world of money, the economy, they've overlapped completely. They're both typically green. That's the color that represents them, but they've overlapped now. We used to have to pay for the environment from the economy. We don't anymore. The environment is going to power the economy. So I'm very confident that a Labour government will pursue the green economy, which is the biggest opportunity that we've ever had since the last industrial revolution, the first industrial revolution, actually. This is an enormous opportunity for our country.
You're up for election in a couple of weeks' time.
12 days.
12 days. One of the biggest problems that is facing your campaign is apathy from younger voters. So what have you been doing to incentivise them to get out and vote?
Well, it's a really important issue, the issue of turnout at elections generally, and it's really important to be candid with you, which is that the Conservative Party is the most successful political party in the democratic world. One of the reasons why they're successful is, in between elections, they change the rules to make it easier for them to win and more difficult for progressive parties to win. So this time what they've done, between the last mayoral election and this one, is two things that are really important. One is, in London, we've always had a system where you can vote your first preference and you got a second preference, which leads to, I think, better politics, because it means rather than us being adversarial as politicians, we try and court the support of other smaller parties because we want their second preference. And the way it works is, as the votes are counted, if your person you voted for doesn't come in the top two, you're discounted and your second preferences are transferred over. And so in the last election held in London, in the first round, I won by 5%, but the transfers meant I won by a handsome amount. So that's really important. So what have the Tories done? They've got rid of that. It's first past the post. The second thing they've done is a trick they learned from their friends in the Republican Party in America. You're now required to take photo ID when you go and vote. Passport, driving license, an older person's travel card, but not a younger person's roll card. Why? Because younger people tend to vote for Labour, older people tend to vote for the Conservatives. So it's going to be tough, frankly speaking, because 900,000 Londoners, 15%, have not got photo ID. Poorer Londoners, Black, Asian, minority ethnic Londoners, those who are renting, those who are disabled. So it's going to be quite close. And what I've sought to do during this campaign is to talk to London about the progress made despite the Tory government and make the point, just imagine what we could do, a Labour mayor working with a Labour government. So I was really pleased. 7 months ago, for the first time in the history of our city, every child that goes to a state primary school receives a free school meal. And if I'm re-elected, that'll become permanent. I'm really pleased and proud that in our city, we've cleaned up the air. In the centre, a 50% reduction in toxicity. In London, 20%. Tough decision to expand it to Outer London. I think it's the right thing to do. Roadside emissions are now down by 50%. When I was running to be mayor first in 2016, King's College said it would take 193 years, almost 200 years, to make the air in London within legal limits. We'll do it by next year.
What sort of policies are you offering specifically to the 18 to 30 age group that might incentivise them? That age group tends to be very apathetic. It's very difficult to entice them to come out. I know that you touched on a few policies there. What specifically are you offering them that will make them come out?
So younger people aren't apathetic. They're very political. They're just not party political. So 1 out of 3 young people are not registered to vote. So there's been this great campaign from the likes of My Life, My Say to encourage young people to be registered to vote. And last week was the deadline. In the last 2 days, and Dale was part of the campaign, in the last 2 days before the deadline, more than 100,000 people became registered. I'm hoping that they'll vote on May the 2nd. So in relation to policies to offer young people, I think the biggest challenge facing our city is the housing crisis. I speak to too many Londoners who are young, who are priced out of our city. They want to start a family, they want to have a garden, they want a bigger home. And so I announced last week, if I'm re-elected, we will build 40,000 more council homes, 6,000 rent control homes. We will have landlord licensing across our city, and we will pay the legal fees of any tenant that has an issue with their landlord. And I'm really pleased that Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner have announced if Labour wins the next general election, in the first term, they will build 1.5 million new homes. A big chunk are coming in London. So housing's a big issue. The second big issue facing young Londoners is the issue of something Dale alluded to, which is what is the future of our country and our city post-Brexit? Are we going to be Singapore on the Thames, low regulation, or even an Argentina on the English Channel, high inflation, poor economy, or we're going to have an economy that's high-skilled, well-paid, green jobs? London being the green finance of the world, who's going to make the electric vehicle charging points, the solar panels, the wind turbines? So the second big issue, Ava, is making sure we bring in investment to London so younger Londoners and those who want to come to London have the skills for the jobs being created. Really important. And the third thing that I'd say in relation to young Londoners is, look, we've left the European Union, much to my distress and my heartache, but we've not left Europe. And if I'm re-elected, I'm going to introduce an Erasmus-style scheme for those students for them to be able to study in Europe or across the world, for Europeans and others to come to our great city. And I think we should have a work mobility scheme. Those below the age of 30 can work overseas and they can come here. And the joy of this is, our generation grew up being suspicious of the French or the Italians or the German or the Spanish. And now we fall in love with them. Many of us get involved in relationships with them. And when they come here, they fall in love with London. So when they become chief executives or VCs or angel investors or producers in Hollywood or Bollywood, they invest here in London. And I worry about the consequences of the hard Brexit. So if I'm re-elected, I'm going to make sure that we continue to be the greatest city in the world in relation to our relations with colleagues overseas.
So you're going to... So we'll be backing the policy that we heard from Europe this week. So the Brexit EU negotiator, the lead on Brexit in the EU, said that he would like to offer a scheme with the Labour Party where 18 to 30-year-olds will be able to work in Europe and vice versa for 4 years. You'll back that scheme?
I'll back the scheme. And let me tell you one of life's delicious ironies. So Nigel Farage, it's the first time there's not been a boo when I said that. Anyway. So Nigel Farage, because he was an MEP, for a variety of reasons, he fell in love with and married a German woman, right? Which is great. But many of us are deprived of that opportunity. I'm already married, by the way, but those of you who aren't, many of us are deprived of the opportunity to make friends with our European brothers and sisters. That's wrong, and vice versa as well. And so we've got a massive skills shortage in our city. Massive. Hospitality, finance, tech, culture, healthcare, social care. We've also got a labour shortage as well. So a work mobility scheme works both ways. We benefit, our economy benefits, social life benefits, our culture benefits, but also young people here benefit from going to France or Germany or Spain or Italy. And and one of the things that I'm afraid is not going to happen for the foreseeable future is us rejoining the EU, but we can have closer alignment, and that's really important.
Speaking of benefiting, so Sadiq has benefited enormously from something that he's actually just mentioned, which is your campaign to get people voting. And you're going to be doing it again at the next general election. Can you talk to me a little bit about the work that you've done and why you want to do that in the first place?
It's the why first is because I became aware, most of us probably are aware, I don't know, about the new regulations, the voter ID regulations, the attempted gerrymander, the next election. I think the impact on the first by-election under those new rules saw 4,000 people unable to vote. And the Electoral Commission declared it, simply a disaster. So I became aware of the difficulties. There are 3 million people that will vote for the first time in the general election. They'll find it the hardest that it's ever been to take part in our democracy. We've got declining levels of participation anyway since the 1960s. And but primarily, actually, I pivoted last summer from supporting Just Stop Oil to a different outlook, which is Just Stop the Tories. and And I figured what we got to do is get people to vote. And our campaign is called Vote 24. We aren't telling people how to vote in terms of who to vote for, but we're going to help them with how to vote in terms of negotiating the obstacles, registering, getting voter ID and stuff like that. And one of the big kind of channels for us for this will be the live music and event sector, working with festivals here in London and out in the sticks as well, and other major cities, and trying to reach young people through festivals. Festivals and events are a great kind of life experience that people go to and kind of open to new ideas. I learned that myself from festivals as a teenager. So we'll be at Glastonbury, for example. We'll be at Hyde Park. I'm very much hoping. We've had a great response from the music industry. We're working, ironically, with Saatchi and Saatchi, who made, some of you will remember the campaigns they ran for the Tories decades ago. They're helping us run this one. And they've come up with some really creative content, which I won't go into. But yeah, that's why and that's how.
You moved your funding last year from Just Stop Oil to the Labour Party. Why did you do that, apart from wanting to stop the Conservatives? What is it about Labour? I mean, because you've got Keir Starmer. Over the last couple of years, he has pledged many green policies that, arguably he has now reneged on. Are you still confident in them? Are you still happy you moved your funding the way that you did?
So I didn't actually switch funding from one to the other. What I did was to say that I would no longer support Just Stop Oil because I felt that disruptive protest at that time had become a gift to the Conservatives, who were making a culture war of the whole issue. And on top of that, Rishi Sunak clearly wasn't only not listening to the protesters and the calls for no new drilling, he was doubling down, going the other way, announcing more drilling as a response because he saw political opportunity in taking that stance. And so it made no sense to me to continue protesting, giving that gift to the Conservatives and actually just increasing the amount of drilling in the process. And so it made sense to stop working with Just Stop Oil. They are my friends, and we're still friends. And I'd been funding Labour for a long time before that. So I didn't switch funding. I stopped one thing and carried on doing another. Am I confident in Labour? I am. I did mention it before, and I know there's been a lot of fuss made in the media about the 28 billion pledge. Was it ditched? Was it a U-turn? That kind of stuff. From my point of view, the 28 billion was just an arbitrary number. I nearly said just an arbitrary number. I know where it came from. It came from the Climate Change Committee, but I think it became a millstone around Labour's neck. It was announced 2 years ago when the economy was in a very different place. And it didn't make sense to me for Labour to just nail themselves to that particular sum of money, particularly with an election coming. We know what the Tories will say. They'll say that Labour are profligate, taxes will go up because Labour will make a lot of unfunded spending pledges and stuff like that. And I think Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves were right to take that away from them and say that we'll only spend the money that we have. But the other important point to make, why this didn't bother me, is that I understand that investment is a good thing, it's not a bad thing, and borrowing for investment is not a bad thing. The Conservatives and the Conservative media have created this narrative that if you're a government and you borrow money, it's a bad thing. That isn't necessarily true. All businesses know that if you borrow money to invest in growth in projects that pay their own debt, pay their own interest, and make a return, that's how you grow. That's how economies grow as well. And I'm confident there are so many opportunities in the green economy that either don't need money, that's onshore wind and solar, they simply don't need money, or they do need investment, but that investment is a good investment that we'll get what we need, whatever the number Labour pledges.
I'm going to start with a couple of questions that are coming in. I don't know if you've all got the QR code. I think it's should be accessible for you. But there's just one here, Dale, because at the beginning, you were talking about how you like to speak to the right-wing media. And you said that that's because you like to access an echo chamber that you're not normally privy to. But someone here is asking, how do people usually react? And why is it so important to do it in the first place?
The reaction is actually really good. The reaction of the particular interviewer at the time may not be, but quite often it is. I've had some decent conversations, actually. Nigel Farage, no booing. Piers Morgan. I've been on their shows and actually managed to get across information. Piers Morgan and I had a big clash over silly things, because that's what he likes, right? Avocados. If you're a vegan, he's going to attack you with avocados. And it turns out he didn't know that they don't all come from America. And he had a kind of breakdown in the middle of this interview. And when you looked at his his followers' comments on YouTube and stuff, they were completely slaughtering him. They said he was finished. And so the reaction of people that watch these people, that's the most important thing. The interviewers are somebody to either have a good conversation with or actually just to do battle with. It's like a wrestling match of, for me, it's arguments. I think often for them it's opinion and emotion and kind of clickbait statements. But it's really important to reach their audience, and that's why I go there.
Have you ever gotten one over on Piers Morgan, Sadiq?
Oh, so yeah. I mean, I think Dell's right. I mean, and I do all those outlets as well, because look, people do have genuine anxieties. People are concerned about the transition from where we are now to where we want to be. People are sold misinformation and disinformation and lies, and if we're not on the pitch, we've got no chance of persuading them about the arguments that we want to put forward and stuff. I mean, Tony Benn used to write a column for the Sun newspaper, and he was asked, why do you write for the Sun? And Tony said, because the voters read the Sun. And so, if Dale and I aren't doing those outlets, it means that the other side are hogging the pitch. And so it is important to explain, because, voters, concerns are concerns. And so we've got to address them. And so the jargon we use in the green industry is a just transition. What that basically means is supporting people move from where they are to where we want them to be. Whether it's, a scrappage scheme when it comes to ULEZ, whether it's support with their bills when it comes to the transition and so forth. And so, I support Dell doing it all the time. I mean, he does it more than I do because he's got a thicker skin and he's more patient. But, it's really important.
Do you think they're receptive to your ideas?
The viewers definitely are. I mean, it's just not true to say that everyone who watches, choose right-wing media that you want to choose is of the same view. There's been polling done in relation to the readers of various newspapers that are right-wing, various satellite channels that are right-wing, and yes, small minority have the same views as the presenters, but a big majority are basically just people who want to watch these things. My nervousness, though, is the algorithms on social media, because the way TikTok or these other social medias work is you have an echo chamber, and so you only receive that one school of thought. So we know, for example, if a young boy Googles Andrew Tate, for the foreseeable future, he will just receive that sort of misogynistic, vile, horrible stuff. And the same goes for climate change deniers and so forth. So I'm nervous about the algorithms of this social media stuff. But as far as broadcasts are concerned and newspapers, I think most of their readers are people who have got genuine questions. They're curious, and we've got to be in the pitch.
Add something to that. We've been working with the Daily Express now for probably 3 years. We launched a Green Britain campaign with them, and they turned their masthead green for the start of that, which is quite improbable. It's supposedly a right-wing audience, and what we found is that it's shifted their opinion, and the editor of the Express and his team have found that their readers like what's being talked about. And we did a dip test, it was about a year ago now in the summer, and we found that the Express had almost the same coverage of climate and environment issues in 1 month as The Guardian did. And that had changed the editorial approach of the Express because they were feeling the response from their readers. And so that's another good reason to do it, because we can actually change how they talk about the world. And one last example of that is football. We rescued our local football club called Forest Green Rovers. We took our environment message into a pretty improbable audience, the world of football fans. And then 10 years later, they've embraced it. Our fans are all veggie, vegan, buy electric cars, solar panels. They tell me about it all of the time, And we just found that football fans are normal people. And when you show them what it is that's a problem and what they can do about it, they pick it up and run with it.
I know that Sadiq will be itching to ask this one, but I'm going to start with Dale. So Georgia is asking, we've touched on food and energy. The other of the big three is transport. How will you enable the radical change needed in our transport system?
I think it's happening already. Obviously, we need more and better public transport, but that's always been the case. And electrifying buses is happening. Trains could be done faster. Electric cars are taking over the roads. We'll have trucks on the road very soon, maybe within the next 12 months. And we've started an electric airline. So the whole transport sector is capable of being electrified so that we can stop the burning of fossil fuels. And what I didn't say at the start was, in order to solve all of these problems we face, the climate crisis, the decline globally of wildlife. We're in the sixth mass extinction in the Earth's 4 billion year history, and the human health crisis. To solve all of those, we need to do two things: stop burning fossil fuels and stop eating animals. And the burning of fossil fuels is, thank you, I'll stop. The burning of fossil fuels is not just for power stations, it's for traditionally transport. And so we can electrify those two sectors and save the animals, save ourselves.
Come on, Sadiq, how many years have you frozen TfL fares for now?
Oh, now that you ask, 5 out of the last 8. The only mayor to do so. Look, but here's the serious point, that was a serious point as well. Here's the serious point. Look, the world is becoming more urbanized. More and more of the world's population is moving to cities. That's a great thing. So it was about 10 years ago, 40% of the world's population lived in cities. Now it's 55%. It's going to be 60% very soon. The population of London is 9.7 million. That's both an opportunity and a challenge. If all of us owned a car and jumped in our car, it'd be gridlock every day, 7 days a week. So we've got to think about our city, where people live, where people work, where people play, where people study, and make it easier to walk, cycle, use public transport. And that means, yes, freezing the fares to encourage people back to use public transport, but also it means if you're going to drive a vehicle that's not emitting poison. If you're going to drive, you've got to be cognizant that actually we want to have some roads prioritised for cyclists and school streets for people to walk, cycle, and not be run over. And that means understanding that if you drive more than 30 miles per hour, you're 5 times more likely, if you hit somebody, to kill them or cause them serious injury than if you drive at 20 miles per hour. And so it's just in a non-patronising way educating Londoners about the choices we have. And I'm proud we've now got the world's finest rail line, the Elizabeth line, going through London. We've extended the Northern Line. We've extended the Overground. We have the Night Tube. We have the Night Overground. We have the Superloop. We have 6 times more cycle lanes now than I first got elected, and so forth and so forth. And we've got to carry in the cities invested in public transport and clean transport. And by the way, since I've been mayor, we've reduced carbon emissions by more than 19%.
What sort of policies would you advise mayors outside of London on transport? I know that you're a pioneer of building these electrical charging units. You want to see more of them up and down the country?
The first question first, what advice would I give? I think everything that Sadiq said, I mean, he knows better than I, what's needed in the city. But these are broad principles, right? More public transport, less car driving, get to places on foot, on cycle, that kind of stuff. I mean, these are kind of natural ideas. And cities should no longer be designed for the dominance of the motor car and the motor vehicle. We should take back the streets, really, for people. It's always incredible to me to see how much tarmac real estate is given over to cars compared to people who are squished onto pavements and stuff like that. And do I want to see more charging points? Well, I think we will need some more, but I just want to say that there's a lot of range anxiety still in the whole electric car, electric vehicle debate. The technology itself has improved massively in the 10 years or so that it's been here in our country. Cars have got a range of 300 miles now. 500 miles is coming, and most people do 10 or 15 miles a day. And so actually 70% of people, by the way, have access to off-street parking so they can charge their own cars, but that's different in a city. There's much less of that in a city. But at the moment, if you've got a petrol car, you might go to the garage once every 2 weeks. I think that use pattern, we're very close to that with the technology of electric cars today, that you go to a charging station, a fast charging station, once every couple of weeks and top your car up. The technology's here now. I don't think there's a big charging issue.
We've got an anonymous question about something I know that you care deeply about. That's about our rivers getting dirtier and dirtier after privatisation. Do you see any hope for making them clean again?
Yeah, I always only see hope, actually, because we can absolutely change everything. There's nothing we can't change. The system that we live in, the economy that we work within, it's man-made. These aren't the laws of physics that govern how we live and what taxes we pay and that kind of stuff. And, these are the laws of Thatcher, actually, that led to the shit, in our rivers right now and our seas. The privatisation of the water industry is probably the most disastrous of all the disastrous privatisations. None of them have worked. We've got a lot of foreign owners. They're often sovereign wealth funds or pension funds. They've been taking £2.5 billion every every year for the last 30 years from our water system. That money should have been used to build infrastructure to provide us with a vital service. It never made sense to me why we gave away, in effect, vital national infrastructure, water, energy, transport, to foreign interests. The idea that private interests will look after us is just nonsense, but we can see that coming home now. I think the water industry is on the verge of mass bankruptcy. I think a Labour government will have an opportunity to do something really fundamental without having to buy it back through a nationalisation programme.
Would you like to go?
So one of the things that Ava asked is what's in the manifesto for the election on May the 2nd. One of the things I'm promising to do is, just like we've cleaned up the air in our city, if I'm re-elected, we're going to clean up the River Thames over the next few years as well. And let me tell you why it's important. Dale and I are of the age where we'd watch every year the Oxford and Cambridge boat race, and you see at the end the cock's being thrown into the River Thames, right? That did not happen this year. Do you know why? There is E. coli in the River Thames now, which means if you throw somebody in the River Thames, they'll catch a disease. And that's a consequence of what Dale has talked about. But we've been here before. In the 1850s, the Great Stink opened sewers in the River Thames. Bazalgette's sewers ended that. In the 1950s, the River Thames was biologically dead. Up until recently, more than 100 species of fish, 90 species of birds use the River Thames ecosystem. What's happened, though, is since the 1989, by the way, Thames Water, when it's privatised, had zero debt. Now it's got massive, massive, massive debt, as shareholders have removed dividends from the company and leveraged huge amounts of debts to the Thames Water. What does that mean? Thames Water raises their bill every year. In 2023, 5 times as much sewage discharged in the River Thames than 2022. Pipes leak regularly, no investment to clean up the Thames. So if I'm re-elected, and there's a Labour government, we're going to make sure the Environment Agency and Ofwat has some real teeth. We're going to work with campaigners, some great groups across the city, the Port of London Authority, to work together to have a plan to clean up the River Thames, because we've got to recognise this is a massive asset for our city, and we've got to understand the responsibility we have to ensure the River Thames is clean. And that's why I said earlier on, the moment of maximum opportunity, all that we've achieved in City Hall has been despite the government. Just imagine a Labour government and a Labour mayor working together for the good of our city and our country.
But do you think that can be done? Do you think the rivers can really be cleaned up while those companies are private? Do you think that they need to be nationalised?
Well, if they don't sort their house out, they will have to be nationalised. That's the short answer. But what we do know is that Ofwat's got no teeth. The Environment Agency is not doing its job, and Thames Water have got away literally with poison in our rivers. And so they will know when Labour wins that notice has been served. You sort yourselves out, or we will take over.
I'll ask you, while I'm still with you, Sadiq, another anonymous questioner has asked, how do you balance climate targets with Labour's new house building targets?
No, it's not either or. It's not either or. I talked about the London plan, which I'm really proud of. So the London plan means every single building built, residential and commercial, is either net zero or is air quality positive. Just imagine if that London plan was a UK plan. And so the homes that are being built, Ava, won't just be net zero carbon when they're built, they'll be carbon efficient afterwards as well. So there's 2 big jobs we've got to do. One is make sure the new stuff we build is green and clean. But secondly, we've got to retrofit the stuff we've already got. Basically speaking, there are 3 sources of carbon emissions in our city. Transport, I think we can solve that. Offices and homes. And so I'm less troubled about the new stuff, which we've got to do, because, our population's growing. That's great. We're going to have homes for them. We'll make sure they're green homes. The challenge is actually retrofitting the older stuff. And what Dale's talking about in relation to solar and wind is not the grid being powered by fossil fuels, but the grid being powered by renewables. Cheaper bills, but also green as well.
Someone's asking if that can be achieved under capitalism.
Cheaper bills.
Your plans for green energy.
Yeah, I think absolutely they can. A lot of people, let's say on the left of life, see business as the bad guys, right? And I understand that, and to a large extent it's true, right? They do great harm in the pursuit of money above all else. But I think that we can change the rules of that game. Businesses could be, a force for good if we just change the rules under which they operate. We could transform things by, for example, changing company law. At the moment, a company is primarily obliged to serve its shareholders, and that means making money. Let's change that. Let's give them a social environment obligation as well. Let's not allow the pursuit of money above all else. So I think business has a role to play in helping solve this problem. But fundamentally, any of these businesses that are in the old ways of doing things, the big oil and gas companies, people like that, they're the writing's on the wall for them anyway, because renewable energy, the wind and the sun, is already cheaper than any other form of energy available to us. And we still subsidize fossil fuels, by the way. The wind and the sun need no subsidy. So we can absolutely power our whole country from renewable energy with no public money and have permanently very low energy bills, the lowest that we've ever seen before. And just to talk about housing that Sadiq mentioned and zero carbon standards, one of the things that Cameron and Osborne scrapped 10 years ago was a code for zero carbon homes, so that all new homes built were at a zero carbon level with super low bills through a combination of energy efficiency and renewable energy. The cost of that ban in the last 10 years has been $3.5 billion in energy bills to the owners of those new homes. So we can build better homes, and they are better for people in the long run. We just have to, ditch the dogma, the false arguments, the old way of doing things, and change everything.
What practical advice do you have for people in the room today? When they leave here, what's the greenest way that they can start living their life?
My view is kind of like starts at the top end. What are the big problems? Fossil fuels and animal agriculture. They manifest in our lives in three ways: energy, transport, and food. It's how we power our homes, it's how we travel, and it's what we eat. And 80% of all of our personal carbon footprints in this room, and of every business of every size actually, is from those three things: energy, transport, and food. So I would say, look to how you power yourself, look to how you travel, look to what you eat, and see what you can't do to reduce waste, to reduce use. They're slightly different things, and what you must have in those sectors, source it as sustainably as possible. We all spend money every day on these three things. The money that we spend dictates which way the world goes round. So we have more power in this than we think.
Is it going to be vote Labour?
No. Buy Del Vince's book. It's a great book. Make sure you buy his book, or go to the library and read it from the library. It's a really good book. I will say something a bit different to vote Labour, which is, look, all of us are citizens, and I think too many of us think of ourselves as consumers. What I'd say is, just think about the role you've got and the power you've got. And so what I've always said since I've been mayor is, rather than London has been consumers, I'd love them to be citizens and active citizens, whether it's your personal responsibility that Del's talked about, or what you can do to change our environment. And so, I think that for me is the light bulb moment. When you realise you're not a passive consumer, but you're potentially an active citizen. Honestly, the potential is humongous. Just think about the progress we've made over the last few years in our great city. Not perfect, we can do much more, we must do much more. That's been because of people power. And people, saying to me, we've got to be doing this, we've got to be doing that, and me listening to them as well. And don't underestimate the ability you have to influence people in my profession. It's huge. And so that's the big thing you can do, become an active citizen.
And what can they do in 12 days' time?
Vote Labour!
All right. We'll have to end it there, but both of them have books out, so you can go and read Del Vince's book, and Sadiq Khan also has a book out as well. So if you'd like more, go and buy them.
Thank you very much. Cheers.